begin the current Daf, Masech Shabbos Daf Yomi. Beginning the second line down with the top of the Yomim. The Gemara continues the discussion from the previous Daf. Our shiur is co-sponsored by Kalzer and Cheskel. For any time, Daf Chaim. We thank everyone joining us on Zoom. We appreciate everyone joining us. Some of the ideas we're going to speak about today's Daf are the malachas which appear to be done on one's half, if that is prohibited or permitted, regarding giving an animal or a non-Jew food. This can be the first halacha we're going to start off with, which they might carry. Is that problematic? And that's the continuation from the previous stuff. Additionally, is one allowed to do the following things on Friday or earlier, which then is going to continue on Shabbos: rent something to a non-Jew, send a letter with a non-Jew, embark on a voyage by boat, and to give him clothing to a non-Jew. Additionally, starting malacha on Friday will continue on its own into Shabbos. For example, putting crushed olives or grapes into a press. That was our last halacha of our Mishnah. Leaving food or bread in the oven. Additionally, regarding malachas which appear to be done on one's half, what's the halacha regarding some of those things? So we begin the current Daf Yomi, and the Gemara continues from the last discussion that we had, which was about Shabbos Daf regarding. We had spoken about, are you allowed to do stuff Arab Shabbos that's going to continue into Shabbos? So one of them was regarding selling or renting something to a non-Jew, if that's permitted or not, or if he gets out of your house, they also that's okay. The Shabbos says no, he has to get to the house where he's getting to. It doesn't look like he's your agent. So a related machlekes, the Gemara brings the following brisa. Come on, the brisa. Shalacha follows like this brisa. A person on Shabbos is allowed to go ahead and give food for a dog in this courtyard, and not l'biyat. So if the dog takes it and goes out, and thus doing haitzah, transporting it from the private domain to the public domain, this government, you don't have to stop the dog. Similarly, kayetzavai, there's also halacha l'maisa. So you're allowed to give food in front of a non-Jew in the courtyard on Shabbos. This text explains, even according to Shammai, who he said in the previous halacha, in the previous Daf, that you're not allowed to give even on Erev Shabbos unless he has enough time to get home. So text explains, because here we're talking about food. Food, we presume that he's going to eat it where it is. Now, so even if he takes it, that's what the halacha says. Not l'biyatza ain't this carbon. If he takes it, you don't have to stop him, because it's not necessarily like as if you're giving it to him to go ahead and take it out, because we presume he's going to eat it where it is. As Tyson brings, and that's actually halacha l'maisa. But other objects, you're not allowed to give it to him, even according to Basil, because even Basil only permits you to give an object to a non-Jew on Arab Shabbos, but not on Shabbos. So regarding food, you're allowed to give to the dog, you're allowed to give to the non-Jew in your courtyard on Shabbos, and that's the actual halacha. So now it's the Gemara, why do you need the case of the non-Jew? Why not? It's the same thing as the dog, in the sense of you want to give it to something or someone that's going to take it out. So what's the difference? We have to add on with the case of non-Jew. Says the Gemara, mounted him, would you say, hi, the case of the dog is Rami Alei, it's incumbent upon you to feed the dog. We find a classic like kill up to shlichim. I said, we have obligation to give back to the dog that they saved us, but not to put but the non-Jew, there's no incumbent obligation on you to feed him, so therefore you would think that you're not going to go ahead and give him the food. Kamash Malan, that's what the Bryce is coming to tell you that it's permitted, which actually takes as a question. Now, why are you allowed to give the food to the non-Jew if you don't have an obligation to feed him? As we find in our Gemara, and he brings another Gemara that brings to the same effect, then we know, as the Gemara says in the last paragraph, if you're not allowed to do, give food, let's say, to a chazer, because it's not an obligation to feed him. It's a tircha, unnecessary tircha. Why are you actually allowed to give the food to the non-Jew? So Tyson says that since we do feed the paupers that are the Jews and the non-Jews together, so it's because of the ways of peace. So it is like somewhat considered that it is an obligation for you to feed the non-Jew, at least in this regard, where the whole issue would be a shlus, a rabbinic issue. So in that regard, we consider that the Mizraim the son of the left hand, they're allowed to feed the non-Jew and the dog, and we don't care that if they're going to take it out, it's not our problem. It doesn't appear that it's for us, because he's taking out the food that's going to be for himself. Now, the Bryce is similarly the following halacha. Le'asker adam keleb l'nachi. Again, talking about for a non-Jew and talking about regarding Erev Shabbos. So you're not allowed to rent your tools, your car, whatever object that you're renting. You're not allowed to rent it to a non-Jew so you do work with it. Even if you're renting them for Erev Shabbos, because on Erev Shabbos it appears like that you're renting it to him for the purposes of Shabbos, which basically explained. It's not because malach is being done with your kalim and like Rishami as we established in the previous Daf. Because if that would be the case, then it would be usher not only on Erev Shabbos, it would be usher even on, let's say, on Wednesday or Thursday. Rather, he says it's even on like a Basil does not hold the Shlisis kalim, or let's say it's talking about a type of you're renting something like a shirt or a tuxedo that no malach is being done with it. But why is it forbidden on Friday? Because it looks like you're taking what's called schar Shabbos. These are important halachas, so I'm pointing them out. Schar Shabbos is you're not allowed to take rent. You're not allowed to charge for a Shabbos. So although Tyson points out that the case is talking about that you're actually renting it for, let's say, a month or a week, which generally that's not a problem for schar Shabbos. Only not allowed to charge for the day of Shabbos itself. But since it gives the appearance as schar Shabbos, because you're doing it right before Shabbos, it looks like you're renting for Shabbos, so therefore it would be forbidden on Erev Shabbos. But like Tyson says, it's specifically the case regarding renting. That looks like you're charging for Shabbos. But let's say to lend, that you're allowed to do even on Erev Shabbos. So we're talking about over here, because it gives the appearance of schar Shabbos, you're not allowed to rent it to him on Friday afternoon. But let's say on Wednesday or Thursday, so then mutter then to be committed because that does not give the appearance, and you're not doing it, you're not charging for the day, charging for the day you wouldn't be able to, you're charging for the week of the month, and it would be permitted. Okay, so like similarly, we have halacha that Ein Mashalchin Igris B'Yad Nocher B'Erev Shabbos. I'll send a letter with a non-Jew on Erev Shabbos, because that looks like he's your agent to do this. When's he going to do this? The next day? He's not doing it right now. So he's going to be doing it through the next day. It looks like he's your agent. That's forbidden. But if you give it to him on Wednesday, Thursday, then it's going to be permitted, because even if you're going to do it on Shabbos, but again, you're not telling him to do it on Shabbos, and therefore, even if he doesn't, it's going to be permitted. Now, however, Amr Lama Rabbi Sekai, we said regarding Rabbi Sekai, some say Rabbi Sechasid, that Rabbi the pious, you were never able to find his handwriting in the hand of a non-Jew ever, because he didn't want him to go ahead and deliver it on Shabbos. When he delivered on Shabbos, it looks like as if he told him to do it on Shabbos. So to avoid the appearance of Marasayin, as if he told him to deliver it on Shabbos, so therefore he never had his handwriting, the non-Jew. He didn't want to give the appearance as if he was doing this prohibition of sending a non-Jew as an agent to do malach of him on Shabbos. Now, turn in the Brisa, we're going to discuss the same case. However, we're going to add on another variable. There's two primary forms of agency. There's that of schirus. Schirus is that you're hiring him, you're paying him per work, which is either per day or per hour or per week, whatever it is. So that we said is forbidden to be done on Erev Shabbos, because that looks like he's your agent. He's working for you. Then there's something else, as we're going to introduce in this brisa, of katzatz. Katzatz is a set amount, similar to the concept of kabbalah, which is, we set an amount. I don't care if you work an hour or a week or a year, whatever it is, you're getting paid the same amount. That's going to introduce the concept of what's called mitaiti kavod. When he does the work, when he does it, how he does it, he's doing it for himself. He's getting the same set amount. So that's what we have to keep in mind when we discuss this next brisa. So we'll learn the brisa, which is also halacha l'maisa. Ein meshachin nigeres b'yadnachi erev Shabbos. Although in the postal service it might be different, and the place can talk about it. But in the basic halacha, if you're doing by a hand delivery with a non-Jew, the halacha is as follows: Ein meshachin nigeres b'yadnachi erev Shabbos. You're not allowed to send a letter in the hand of a non-Jew on erev Shabbos. Elam came kaitziflei done, unless you stipulate the fee, you set the price. Once you set the price, say, okay, and that's what we have in this postal service. You set exact amount. So when he decides to deliver, he's delivering it for himself, because anyways he's getting the same amount no matter when he does it. Now that's the bin mitzvah. Shammai does not agree regarding this halacha of katzas, and even by katzas they disagree, because it's not going to be any better in the cases of that we discussed in the previous daf of selling or lending or giving a gift that he says forbidden to be done in Erev Shabbos. Rather, what the brisa qualifying is the opinion of Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel is saying you're not allowed to send it Erev Shabbos if you were not katzas. There they don't disagree with Beis Shammai. On Erev Shabbos it's going to be forbidden because it looks like that it is as if he's your agent. What they're saying is, but if you did stipulate a fee, then Beis Hillel would hold that you're allowed to do that even on Erev Shabbos. And based on this, Taisa says that you have to say all the cases in the Mishnah we spoke about that Beis Hillel says permitted, let's say to give your clothing into the cleaners on Erev Shabbos, or to give your hides into the danner, and that's the halacha l'maisa. Must be talking about that it's katzatz. Must be that it was a set fee. Because if there was no set fee, then we see Beis Hillel holds it not allowed, because it looks like he's your agent by giving it to him on Erev Shabbos. And as the Gemara's question that's going to ask shortly about halei katzatz is going specifically according to Beis Hillel. So, but again, the basic brisa is saying that you're not allowed to send a letter on Erev Shabbos unless you set an exact amount. Shammai, they say, and this is we're going to ask shortly a contradiction in the brisa itself. Shammai, they say, Kadesh Gila Besa. He has to be able to get to the house of who the letter is being sent to before Shabbos. Only then can you send the letter in Erev Shabbos. The Beis Hillel say, that he has to be able to get to the house that's closest to the walls of the city, to the city that it was sent to. Says the Gemara, I don't understand how you read this brisa. But like katzatz, you just start off the brisa by saying that you set an amount for how much you charge, how much he's charging you, the non-Jew, to sending the letter. So why is Basil saying it's forbidden unless it gets to the wall of the city that you're sending to? But they're the ones, as we learned in our Mishnah, they're the ones who say if you cut such, it's totally permitted even on Erev Shabbos. So what are you saying that it has to get to Labais Hasamach L'chaim? So Rav Sheshes, she says, he explains the Bryce, and what it's talking about is, if they did not set a price, that's with the safe. You're right. If we're talking about in the ratio, if they set a fee, again, as we explained from Rashi and Tesis, that's only according to the Hill, then you're allowed to do it even on Erev Shabbos. Because what's called a Daiti Dedavshikot, he's doing it for himself. He's not doing it on Shabbos for me, and everyone knows he's working for himself. But the Sefer is talking about, if they did not set a fee, that's the Machlekes. The Shamrim, they say, actually, the basis. And then, okay, Erev Shabbos, he looks like he's working for you. You're also charging him for the work. He's schiris. He didn't set a fee. Depends how long it takes him. So then he's charging per hour. So then it looks like that as if he's working for you. So then he has to really get there to the guy's house before Shabbos. It also looks like he's doing work for you on Shabbos. But they say no, as long as he gets to the house that's closest to the wall, that's enough. It doesn't have to get to that actual guy's house, because his house actually might be the house close to the wall. That's what Mepharshim explained this opinion. So that's the Gemara, but it's still difficult. With Ba'amrit Reisha, he said in the Reisha that a Mishalchin, you said they did not let us send a letter with a non-Jew to whoever you're sending a letter to on Erev Shabbos, unless you will cut us. Which that sounds like across the board, and it doesn't make a difference even if it's going to get to his house. That you're not let us send a letter Erev Shabbos unless you set a price. Those are the opening words of the price. It says that a Mishal didn't get us beyond Erev Shabbos. You're not allowed to send a letter on Erev Shabbos. Elam King Kites lay down. So you're right. If you cut it, you're allowed to. But then you're saying the same tomorrow when you're not cut us, then how you allowed to send it, even if it's going to get it to the house or the house close to the wall? But you say not to send the letter at all. And yet here you're saying you're allowed to send as long as it can get to his house. Says the Malakash, not difficult. There's also the halacha l'maisa. The sefer that says you're permitted to, as long as it's going to get to his house, or let's say the house close to the wall of the city, is to kiviyah beidar. We're talking about that there is a mayor in the city, a leader of the city. And as the Mepharshim explained, that there's many different interpretations in the Rishonim. We're going with Rashi's opinion. And they explain in Rashi that it's not specifically a mayor. We just would say that a mayor, he's commonly there, and people send letters to him, and he's commonly found b'masa in the city. So then you're allowed to send on Erev Shabbos, even without stipulating a set fee, as long as the agent, the messenger, delivery, could get to either according to Bishamai, to the house of the mayor himself, or according to Bisel, to get to the house closest to the wall. But as long as he's always there, they could find him. So it's not enough to get to his house, because if he's not home, they're not going to deliver. So when did we say on the Sefer that you're allowed to go ahead and deliver it on Erev Shabbos, even though you did not set a fee? As long as you could get to him. That's if the person lives there generally. He's the mayor. Some explain that means that there's a postmaster. But be that as may, the person is there and you can get him. So then if you could get him and he's going to be there, so then you could deliver on Erev Shabbos. I'm not concerned it's going to be done on Shabbos. But the ratio that we had said that no, you're not allowed to send that all on Erev Shabbos if you did not stipulate a set fee. That's like could be a big muscle when there's no mayor in the city. And therefore it's like a regular person. He might not be there. He might be somewhere else. And then on Shabbat, he's going to have to find him. He couldn't get him on Friday because he wasn't home. Comes like an hour later, 3 hours later, then tomorrow. And then Saturday on 3 p.m., he's delivering the letter to him. Oh, that looks like a shluchah. Never that's going to be permitted. You're right. If it's katzatz, Basil says it's permitted on Erev Shabbos, even on Erev Shabbos, because he's working for himself. But on Friday, when did we say that you're not allowed to deliver at all? Is if there's no Ve'der b'masa. The person does not live there permanently. But if he does, then you're allowed to deliver on Erev Shabbos as long as he can get to either his house, like Bishami says, or like Basil says, at least to the house that's closest to the city walls, which is earlier than that. Now we continue with similar halachas regarding things started from before Shabbos that then continue on to Shabbos. Talking about in the Bryce, this is halach l'maisa. Ima fliegin desfina. One is not allowed to go ahead and depart from dry land to the sea, which that's the terminology of hafligen. Hafloga means a distance, which you're going on to a boat because you separate yourself from the land that everyone lives on. You're not allowed to go onto a ship. Less than 3 days before Shabbos. Now, there's many different interpretations in the Rishonim and the Paiskim regarding what's the reason. Some say it's because of Chum Shabbos, which Tosfos rejects. Some say it's because of seasickness. Some say, like Tosfos brings, The reason is because of swimming, because if you're going to be in a boat, you might have to swim, and swimming is forbidden on Shabbos. Some say because it's going to create situations of which might compromise the halachas of Shabbos. So that's specifically within 3 days. And let's say regarding the one of seasickness, so that's because after 3 days you're not going to have seasickness anymore. And if some say regarding that of Chil Shabbos, some say that's only 3 days before Shabbos that you have to be concerned. Like we say 30 days before Pesach, you have to be concerned about halachas. So 3 days before Shabbos is when, like, Shabbos is in the center of the week. So 3 days before we have to be concerned before. But let's say on Monday you don't have to be concerned about Chil Shabbos. But be that as it may, one cannot go on a ship if less than 3 days before Shabbos, if he's going to be going and on the boat for a long time, which he can be on the boat for Shabbos. Now, says the Bryce of Medvar, when we say this prohibited, is the Vahar going for an elective, a voluntary, optional thing. So the mitzvah purpose, then Shabbat doesn't allow to go even with 3 days of Shabbos. Now, but the halacha is, and this halacha l'maisa, but he has to stipulate with the non-Jewish sailor, with the captain, Abanas Lishmas, that at least he's going to stop on Shabbos. But be'ein Shabbos, but he does not have to stop. The only thing you have to do is you have to reveal your intention that you don't want to be traveling on Shabbos. But as long as you tell him that, even if he continues, that's not a problem. That's the Rebbe. Shmuel says, no, you don't have to make that stipulation. It's okay that since it's for a mitzvah purpose, you're allowed to be on the boat on Shabbos. Now says the Bryce of Mitzul at Satan, from Tzur to this place Satan, which is only a distance of a day. I fill the Arab Shabbos, and even on Arab Shabbos, which Arab Shabbos was the market day, as he was mutter, it's permitted because since it's right there, we don't concern yourself, even though it's supposed to 3 days, because it's not a distance of 3 days, and then you're allowed to travel by boat on Arab Shabbos. Now we continue to turn around with a similar type of halacha, also halacha l'maisa. It was not so practical, but it could be with the Jewish army. In Sarin al Ayorish al Nachem, we're not allowed to lay siege to the cities of the non-Jews. Less than 3 days before Shabbos. Now, this prohibition of starting Malcham is similar because 3 days before the soldiers are afraid, or it might be a possibility of Chil Shabbos. So be that as may, 3 days before Shabbos, you have to be concerned about Shabbos. So if it's a Machamis Rishus, then we're not supposed to start the 3 days before Shabbos. If they did start, then they mafsik, and then we don't stop them from fighting. Somebody said, as we find the pasuk in Devar, it says that you're going to build a siege on the city which is making war with you, and you should do it. So the pasuk outgridded them until it's conquered. What does it mean until it's conquered? Which means afil b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos, once you started, you continue going all the way. So again, these are different halachas regarding things that you start from before Shabbos. When do we have to be concerned for certain halachas, as we said, regarding sending the letters, or regarding renting something to the non-Jew? That's forbidden on Arab Shabbos, but let's say earlier in the week, like Wednesday, Thursday, you're allowed to. That doesn't look like he's your agent. And regarding things like going on a cruise or waging war, so that shouldn't be done 3 days before, but earlier in the week than that, it is permitted to stop it. Now, to the next halacha of the Mishnah, where he says, we have a regarding giving clothing to the laundry. So we rule, like Basil, not giving your stuff to the cleaner on Arab Shabbos. Now I tell him, make sure it's ready by Monday, because then you know he's not open on Sunday and he's going to work on Saturday for you. But if you just give it in, he decides when he's going to do it, then it's permitted to be done. But B'Shabbos says it's forbidden. It has to be able to have been done before Shabbos. And that the Mishnah brought, the Mishnah deal, their household, although they're from the school of Hill, they rule like this and stringently to be like B'Shabbos. So time to learn the Bryce and continue on this halacha that was brought in the Mishnah, that they were given the white clothing 3 days before Shabbos, because it takes 3 days to launder it. So the Gemara expounds on that. Amar Tzadik says, this was the custom of the household of Rabbi Shloimy. They would give the white clothing to the launderer 3 days before Shabbos. With Tzvuim, but the colored clothing, a fill of Arab Shabbos, they would give it even on Arab Shabbos. Now, with the Rebbe Levada, from their words, from that practice, we learn because the white clothing is harder to wash, more than the colored clothing, and that's why the colored clothing you'll be able to give it later in the week, because it didn't take that long to clean. The white took longer, and they were going like B'Shabbos, that you have to finish it before Shabbos. Now, the relevance of that is how much money do you pay to the launderer? Obviously, a harder job is going to cost more. That's what we're doing now from their practice. And the Gemara brings a story related to this. Abaya gave colored clothing to the launderer to clean. So Amalei said to him, how much do you want to charge for this washing? So Amalei says, how much I charge for the white clothing? Amalei says, the rabbis already beat you to this. They already taught us that the white clothing is harder to wash and clean than the colored clothing, that means you're ripping me off. Because if you're charging me like the white clothing, obviously you're overcharging for the colored clothing because those are easier to wash than the white clothing. Now we'll continue a live discussion regarding the launderer, regarding washing things. Again, Omar Baya says, someone gives his clothing to the launderer. So b'mishkan nasibly, he should give it to him by measurement. Or b'mishkan niskulei, and should take him from measurement. In other words, he should measure it, his clothing, when he gives it to the cleaners, when he gets it back. Why? It says because to eat toffee, if your clothing is bigger than when you gave it in, so then they ruined your clothing because they stretched it out. If it's smaller than when you gave it, after they ruined it, the Chad said because they shrunk it. This most men learn this lesson the hard way when they're doing the load, is that they realize they put in a hot cycle and then it turns out that it shrunk. So either way, if you're giving it to the launderer, be measured because you're going to figure out one way or the other that they ruined your clothing, either because it's too big now or because it actually shrunk. Now we continue with the last halacha of our Mishnah. We said that although there's machlokes beishamai still, if you're allowed to start a malach on Erev Shabbos and continue to Shabbos, which we discussed in the previous Daf, we came out that beishamai holds, let's say, the problem of shvisas kelim, you know, have, even though you're not doing anything, but your kelim and the malach will be on Shabbos. Or another interpretation that they're concerned that if your stuff and doing malach is to be on Shabbos, you might come do it yourself. But b'shav and elam elam, we said the last malach of the Mishnah was that both of them agree that Shatayin and Mechula, that you're allowed to go ahead and load up the kairos beis abad. You're allowed to have this beam that is being weighed down on these circular planks that have the olives or the grapes in the middle, and it's squeezing it out, even though it continues to squeeze it on Shabbos, that Beishamai agrees in that case that that's permitted. So that's the grass, the obvious question. Ma'ishba kulu, what's the difference? All the other halachas that the Gazr Beishamai made exist says, no, I'll start Erev Shabbos, even though you're not doing anything on Shabbos. You're not allowed to have the malacha continue being done on Shabbos. What's the difference with the beans of the olive press, the gulia gas, and the planks of the wine press? That their Beishamai did not make this gezer. Says the Gemara, the reason is because Hanach, all those other cases in the Mishnah, the Ablu b'Shabbos, if they would be done on Shabbos, Nechayiv Chatas, if you were whitening the bundles of flax, you would be liable for Karma Chatas. That's Malabim. If you did any one of those malachas, you'd be Chayiv Chatas. So God, the Beishamai, Erev Shabbos, and Beishamai says, we know that you do even Erev Shabbos before it's getting dark. Again, because let's say if you did on Shabbos, you might be Chayiv Chatas, then I'll do it even on Erev Shabbos. As we said, one interpretation, because then you might come to do it on Shabbos, and if you do, it's going to be Chayiv Chatas. But Kairos Beis Abad, but this case of the beam, of the olive press, the gula gas, and the circular planks of the wine press, the Avlu b'Shabbos, even if you did on Shabbos, Loi Mechayiv Chatas, you would not be Chayiv Chatas, it would only be an Isra. So therefore, Loi Gazim. There they did not make this Gezerah of the Isra of doing it on Erev Shabbos. So now the Gemara asked the question. So wait a second. So you're telling me that this case of the Mishnah, the last case, is only Issa Drabbanan. That's why we don't make the Gzera on Erev Shabbos. That would be like a Shvus, like Gzera of a Gzera. Even if you did on Shabbos yourself, be Drabbanan. So now the Gemara asks, Man Tana, who's the Tana of our Mishnah? The Chalmidi does, the Mela, anything that happens by itself, like for example, these liquids, which, as we explained from Rashi in the Mishnah, they were already crushed from before Shabbos. So now that when they're squeezing it on Shabbos, they would really squeeze out by themselves, as long as you started from before Shabbos. So therefore, if it would happen by itself, Shabbos Dami would be okay. You would not be violating the Chiv of Chatas, and then would not make the Gzera of Erev Shabbos up to Shabbos. Who is that time that holds that if it would be coming out anyways by itself, and you just, let's say, make it come out quicker, that would not be the Chiv Deiraisa. So Rabbi Yissi, says Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel, that now they learn the Mishnah, Mesechtes Idis. The Mishnah says that the following halacha: Hashum, if there's garlic, or bahaboiser, or those are the unripe grapes, and they're very small. But what they would do is they would try to get out, they would squeeze out the liquid, because it would be very acidic, and they would want to dip the meat into it because it's very strong. So they would take these unripe grapes, or bahamaliles, which are the grains that also didn't fully mature. They would crush it, they would weigh it down with stones, and the liquid that would ooze out, they would dip their food into it. So any one of these cases, which garlic or these unripe grapes or the unripe grain, which shariska, they would crush it and they would use the juice for their food. So if they would chop from before Shabbos, Rabbi Shmuel Oimer, and this the halacha I was saying is the kind of Mishnah, he says Yigmar. Once you crush them and now they're being weighed down and you're just leaving it over there and it's oozing out by itself, you're allowed to let it finish Mishra Tefshach for when it gets dark. and that permitted even initially to be done. Why? Because even if you did it with your yadayim, you did it with your hands, it would not be chiv chatas because already was crushed from before Shabbos, already oozing out anyway. If you would be doing it, would just be making it come out quicker. So therefore, we let it be done from before Shabbos. He's the Tana of our Mishnah because whereas Rabbi Kiva, he says it's a continuum of days. He says no, lo yigmar, you're not allowed to let it finish. In other words, you're not allowed to leave it there from before Shabbos under the weights so that it should finish on Shabbos because we don't let you do it because if you would do it on Shabbos, then you would be chayav chiv chatas even though it was already crushed from before Shabbos. So therefore, that's one Tana that we could say the Tana of our Mishnah is Rabbi Shmuel that we see he holds that this idea if it's coming out by itself would not be the chiv chatas. Now, another interpretation of Rabbi Lazar Amar. Now, this Rabbi Lazar is the Amoyer, Rabbi Lazar ben Padas. He says Rabbi Lazar, it's not himself, he's referring to Rabbi Lazar ben Shemua, where we generally mention it in the Gemaras and Mishnayos and Bryce, when we say Rabbi Lazar, the Tana, it's Rabbi Lazar ben Shemua. So Rabbi Lazar is saying it's Rabbi Lazar. Which Rabbi Lazar is? This is not like in the Mishnah, and later on, the Gimel base. Mishnah says Chalas Devash, honeycombs, which is that you have the beehive, and you take down, they're made like lobes of wax, and there's honey inside. If they were sheriska, and if they were crushed by Erev Shabbos and Erev Shabbos, and they're oozing out by themselves, still the Tanna Kamma says it's usher to go ahead and eat that honey on Shabbos, because we're concerned that you might come to squeeze it. You're going to come to squeezing the Chayv the Issa Daresa on Shabbos. So even though it's oozing out by itself, that's the halacha we know as Mashkin Shazavu, you now go ahead and use that honey on Shabbos. But Rabbi Lazar says permitted. Why? Because he holds even if you would squeeze it on Shabbos, you would not be liable for the chiv deraisa of Shlita because it was already crushed before Shabbos. It's going to lose that by itself anyway. So even if you did more, you would not be chiv lechatis. So therefore, he's the Tana of our Mishnah that says that we're not going to be going even according to Bishamai for it to be started in Erev Shabbos because Bishamai is concerned there's lots of you might come to do it on Shabbos. Okay, even if you did it on Shabbos, we're going to chiv lechatis. We're not going to make Xera, and therefore it's permitted to go ahead and have those beams way down on Shabbos because you started from before Shabbos. But now the Gemara asked, regarding either interpretation, why didn't they select the other one? In other words, we have two interpretations of the Gemara. Who's the Tana of Mishnah? One said it's Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Lazar said Rabbi Lazar. Why did not each one say like the other ones that that's the Tana of Mishnah? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yisrael Chanina. My time will limit Rabbi Lazar. Why didn't they say like this Rabbi Lazar? We just quoted at the time of Rabbi Lazar from this case of the honeycombs. You see that Rabbi Lazar holds the honeycombs as long as it was crushed before Shabbos. Not only the Tana Kamma, we're not concerned. We let you go ahead and use that honey. Obviously, because he holds that you wouldn't be chiv chatas even if you squeezed it yourself on Shabbos. So Allah will tell you that no. Hasam over there by the honey who did he kara eichel. In the beginning, before the honey was oozing out from the honeycombs, it was a food item. Well, besides, and at the end, after the honey oozed out from the honeycombs, it's still an eichel. It's still a food item. Oh, so that's why we're not going to make a gzera of because you might come to squeeze it out when it's on Shabbos because it doesn't apply to halacha schita at all. It's not dash because it's not taking out a liquid from a solid. It's a solid before, it's a solid later, so that's not metharic. So therefore, that's why it's permitted to go ahead and, according to Rabbi Lazar, to eat the honey. But halacha indicates in our Mishnah when we talk about the olives and the grapes that are being weighed down with the planks. Mikara eichel. Beforehand, before you squeeze out the juice, it's considered a food item. The hashka mashka, but now when it's squeezing it out, it's a beverage. Oh, there we have to make a xera. Then maybe you're going to come to squeeze it out when it's already Shabbos. That would be the biblical schita, and therefore maybe that actually Rabbi Lazar would not hold up, and there cannot necessarily be the time of the Mishnah to say that Bisham would hold that it's going to be permitted because that actually would be schita. Maybe there we would make a xera, even though it's coming up by itself. So now the Gemara says, but Rabbi Lazar, he would tell you that no. Hashemin le Rabbi Lazar, we actually learn by Rabbi Lazar that's what we find an explicit source that it doesn't just say by honey. You're saying, oh, you can not necessarily be the time because honey was a food item and it's still a food item. So that's not schita. And how would we know he would say the same thing regarding olives and grapes? And that's the Rabbi Lazar where we have an explicit brayso that he does say by zeis manav nami shari that even by olives and grapes that it was already crushed from before Shabbos, it could continue oozing out. Then you could go ahead and it's permitted. And it's not prohibited as the Mashkin Shazam. We find that he says it by olives and grapes too. And therefore he is the Tana of Mishnah. Because the Kiyas of Rav he brought the following price. The price says, if olives and grapes were crushed before Shabbos, they came up by themselves. So then the Tana of says, Asr, they're forbidden. But Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Matim, they say permitted. So you see that he holds that this Mashkin Shazam, the liquid that's oozing out, is going to be permitted because he holds that if you would go and do it Yadayim, would not be the chiv deraisa was already crushed before. It's what's called asim amela. So therefore, you see, here's the time of Mishnah. So the Gemara, you're right. Rabbi Yisrael Chanina, brisa, this brisa that that we see Rabbi Elazar disagrees even by Zeisav Anavim, lo yishmili, he didn't hear the brisa. And as we said, we're going to the Mishnah of Chalas Devash, which a Mishnah in Perak Chavish and Nishbra, that you could not have compared to Halacha of our Mishnah because of the question, because we said honey was a food item and still a food item. So therefore, he didn't say that the Halacha of the Mishnah is like Rabbi Elazar because he didn't know that brisa. And from that Mishnah, that was regarding honey is not a right. Now says the Gemara of Rabbi Elazar, my time alone Rabbi Yisrael Chanina. So now we go ask the other way. The second mandam of Rabbi Elazar, why didn't he say like the first mandam of Rabbi Yisrael Chanina? We said the time of the Mishnah is like a Mishmal that's you see by malilis, by the crushed grain, or by the garlic, or by the unripe grapes. He says as long as it's crushed from before Shabbos, you let it finish on Shabbos. So isn't that exactly like the halacha of the Mishnah? Why didn't he say like that it's the time of the Mishnah is Rabbi Shmuel? That Amalachi would tell you that no. Because Lavit, Ma'ala, didn't we learn regarding that halacha of Rabbi Shmuel? Then Amar Rabbi Bar Chanina Rabbi Yechanan, he says as follows. It says, B'mechasaron dicha, if it's lacking pounding, where there's three elements, there's three stages that things they get crushed, that they go through. There's, the first stage is risuk, is chopping. Then the second stage is dicha, is pounding. The third stage is shchika, which is mashing. So as follows. When it's b'mechasaron dicha, when it's lacking pounding, which is the middle stage, Rabbi Yechanan explained to the Kuli Amalui Pliki, no one disagrees that it's forbidden. Why? Because when you load it up, when you do the te'ina, which is after the risuk, even though it's chopped already, but you didn't do the next two stages yet, that's going to be finishing off basically the whole thing about squeezing out. So it comes out that you're really doing it on Shabbos. So it wasn't like, quote, done before Shabbos, because nothing was done from before Shabbos. Just doing risuk is not enough at all. These two finish it up. So if you didn't do even the second stage yet, everyone would agree that it's going to be forbidden to be Nigmar on Shabbos, meaning in that machlekes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva of that Tanakh source that we brought before. Kipli, what's machlekes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva is b'mechasaron shchika, is when you just didn't do the third stage of mashing, which so you did more than just meaning shchika mashing is a later stage than dicha. So when you're loading it up. So that's gonna be doing the shchika. That's gonna be the mashing. Oh, so that's where they had the machlekes to say you already did this stage. You already did this stage before Shabbos. You just didn't do the third stage. Oh, that's machlekes. Rabbi Shmuel says, okay, then you can let it finish on Shabbos. But says Rabbi Yisrael Chanina, but the Haninami, the case of our Mishnah of Kariyas Beis Abad and the circular planes, they're like missing the second stage. So therefore, when you're loading it up from before Shabbos, which Rashi says, meaning all these cases, Rabbi Shmuel would agree that it's going to be usher. In other words, you can't say he's a Tana of Mishnah that says, oh, you're allowed to go ahead and load it up from before Shabbos, because the case of our Mishnah is like missing this stage. Missing this stage, which Rabbi Shmuel agrees that's forbidden to be finished on Shabbos. So therefore, you can't say the Tana of Mishnah, Rabbi Shmuel, because yes, although you did risuk before Shabbos, but in our Mishnah you only did, let's say, risuk, but you're still doing these two stages on Shabbos. That Rabbi Shmuel would say it's forbidden. As we said, Rabbi Shmuel only says, look, if you did risuk and you did dicha, you just didn't do shchika, the mashing. So that's where he has machlekes with Rabbi Kiva, and he says you're allowed to finish on Shabbos. But if you didn't even do this stage, then he would say it's us. Well, the problem is our Mishnah's case is missing this case. It's like you didn't just do risuk. And therefore, that's why he says he cannot be the Tana of our Mishnah. Now, the Gemara just mentions the Hari Rabbi Yisrael Chanina, which is according to the opinion that he mentioned over here, Rabbi Shmuel, that when you have the unripe grapes or whatever it is, that you crush it from before Shabbos, that, again, as we explained, you did the risuk and you did the dicha, you just didn't do the third stage, and you let it have it ooze out on Shabbos, and that's not a problem about having your things doing malacha for you on Shabbos. Now, the Gemara continues, the way Rashi says it is that since we were mentioning the Beis Havad, the oil, the olive press, because we were mentioning the laws of Schita on Shabbos about having it squeeze out with the heavy beams and squeeze it on Shabbos. So parenthetically, we mentioned this halacha. Taisus actually says is a continuation of the previous halacha, but we'll go with Rashi. The shemen that's left over in the corners of the olive press, that's beneath the beam, so the people would leave it shel badad, but the olive presses. Like they left it for them. They're not going to go ahead and try to move the beam and it would squeeze out the juice, and they would use the juice. But the oil that was stuck beneath the beam, that they left for the olive presses. So too, machzala shel the halacha referring not just to the oil beneath the beneath the beam, but also the mats of the olive presses, which they would use to cover the olives. We have machlokes Rav and Shmuel. These two things, the oil that stays in the press and the mats that were used to cover the olives, Rav Asr. Rav says it's forbidden to move it. Why? Because it's muktzah. Because since it has no other permitted utility, so and let's say the oil was, you didn't think you were able to get to it. So that's what's called muktzah. Muktzah means it's set aside. It was set aside that you had no intention to use it on Shabbos. Now the reason is because, as the Muslim shortly explained, Rav holds like a Yehuda regarding the laws of muktzah. So therefore, that's the more stringent, as we'll learn in the later daf, the more expansive prohibitions of muktzah. Shmuel says permitted because Shmuel holds like Rabbi Shimon that doesn't quote hold of the laws of muktzah, at least in that more broader terminology, as the Gemara explains. That could be involved in the base. Similarly, Hani Karchi de Zuzi. Regarding these were Zuzi is the kazuk, is these piers of mats that they would have to cover the cargo in the ship. So again, we have machlekes. Rav says it's forbidden, which Taisus explains. Rav holds you're not allowed to move these things because of muktzah, and Taisus explains that it has to be talking about because of muktzah machnas meats. Because actually, regarding to the laws of muktzah moving, actually Rav holds like Reb Shimon. Some means to say because these cargo mats, they were used to cover, like on the ship, these fish or other types of things which would make it disgusting. So therefore, these mats would become disgusted. So it's already muktzah machmas bias. It's a type of muktzah because it's disgusting. There you have no intention to use it on Shabbos. So Rav says it's forbidden, but Shmuel says it's going to be permitted. Similarly, another similar halacha. He says a goat that was always used l'chalb. The goat was always there for its milk. Or verachil, or a lamb, or sheep that was always used legizasa for its shearing of its wool. Or betanagelis, or a hen that was always used lebeitzasa for its eggs. And as you can tell, the theme of all these cases are that they are not usually used for slaughtering them, for eating them. They were always designated for a different purpose. Or beturi diradia, or the oxen that were used to be plowed with. Or vitami de iska, or the dates that were used for business, to take them for merchandise to a different place. So regarding all these cases, Rav says they're forbidden. But Shmuel says that they're going to be permitted because since their designation is for things that are forbidden to be done on Shabbos, so then they're forbidden. But Shmuel says no, that's not going to make them forbidden. And these are animals; they're not necessarily forbidden as muktzah on Shabbos. Now says the Gemara, their machlekes is the machlekes in Yehuda and Shimon, as we said before. Where according to Yehuda, that he holds an expansive understanding of muktzah, as we learned in the last paragraph of the base. He says that regarding the laws of Yom Tov, these things are all animals. He says all these cases, he's not allowed to slaughter them on Yom Tov unless they were prepared from before the day. So therefore, these things are going to be forbidden. So although they're animals and you can go ahead and slaughter them on Yom Tov, doesn't make a difference. They're usually not. They were usually designated for non-slaughtering purposes. It would be usher. But Reb Shimon says it's going to be mutter because ultimately these are animals. They're allowed to slaughter on Yom Tov, and Shmuel rules like Reb Shimon. I think Gemara brings a story related to this halacha. There was a certain student, the Uri B'Charta. He ruled in this place called Charta, the Argis, which was the name of the person who built that city. He was a sorcerer, and Rabbi Nuna dwelt in the city, and actually the cave of his burial is still over there. He ruled in that city. This student, Reb Shimon, like Reb Shimon, that you're allowed to go ahead and move these things or slaughter these things, but that in the more lenient interpretation of the laws of muktzah. So Shamdi Rav Nuna, who lived in that city, he excommunicated him. So the Gemara wonders, but we, as the Gemara tells us later on, rule like Reb Shimon that we don't have those expansive, we're more lenient in the laws of muktzah. So why did he excommunicate with Allah as like Reb Shimon? Says the Gemara, because Ba'asid Rabbah, but that was the place of Rav. And as we just mentioned before, Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who was more stringent laws of muktzah. So he should not have done that to rule leniently, although that's the way we rule in the locale of Rav, where Rav rules more stringently like that of Rabbi Yehuda. Similarly, regarding students ruling, there were these two students. One saved food and beverages because of a fire. He saved a lot of food and drink to a courtyard that had an eruv. And he did it b'chad in one container, which just related to a Mishnah later on of Kufchaf Marav, that you're allowed to save a basket that has in it many different loaves, even though it's 100 meals worth, although really the halach is only allowed to save 3 meals worth, But if it's a one container, then you can save as much as is in there. So he did that in one container. When they once saved in 4 and 5 containers, meaning as Rashi explains, Tais disagrees, but rather what he did was he took 4 or 5 containers, but then he rolled it up all into one large vessel and he carried it one shot. So one did in one vessel, one container, one did in 4 or 5, but then he rolled it up and took it in one shot. It says the Gemara, the Rabbi Barzav, the Rav Huna, which the Gemara brings later on, that that's the machlekes regarding which it's not a machlekes, but could you take it? Should you be taking it in one shot because it's only one time, but then it's heavier, or should you take it 4 or 5 different times, which it's more times, but it's less heavier? We'll see there in that sugya, but that's what the Gemara is bringing, that these 2 students, because we spoke about the students, we spoke 2 students, that they did it in these 2 different ways, because that's what they were disagreeing. The machlekes, the Rabbi Barzav and Rav Huna. The next Mishnah, which we're just going to do the Mishnah, the next Mishnah continues on the theme of the previous Mishnah, is we're going to starting something at Erev Shabbos that continues into Shabbos. And our Mishnah talks specifically in regards to the laws of bishul on Shabbos and cooking. So bishul is one of the lamed says malachas that's forbidden to be done on Shabbos. So it says the Mishnah, ain't silent, as we pointed out in the previous hour, we're talking about specifically around roasting. Ain't silent, not only roast, buster, meat, pitzal, onions, ubaya, and eggs. Only if it's roasted from before Shabbos. So if it didn't roast, which the Gemara is going to explain how much does that have to be roasted, these are the important halachas that we come to regarding the blech and these things. You're not going to be roasting on Shabbos, on Erev Shabbos, unless it's fully roasted, and we'll see what fully roasted means, from before Shabbos. So to a nice and pasla tamim chachik, up and bread into the oven that before it gets dark on Erev Shabbos, or b'lecharara, or not a cookie, some type of dough that's baked on the coals. You cannot put on the coals unless if the surface of the dough has already crusted from before Shabbos, which that's the first thing that gets hard, is the outside crust. Lazar, he disagrees. He says, has to be that the bottom of the dough has crusted, which he mustn't explain. What does it mean by the bottom? Is it the bottom? Because in Talmudic times, they would slap the dough onto the wall of the oven. And that's how they would bake things. So does the bottom mean the part that's hitting the oven, or the bottom facing the bottom of the oven, which is where the fire is on the bottom? What does it mean the bottom? They must explain that. Now the Gemara says there are some exceptions to this rule of that you're not allowed to put something into roast right before Shabbos. You are actually allowed to be mishalshenes on Pesach. You're allowed to lower down the carbon Pesach, the tanim chashet, which we should be able to do speedily in our days, into the oven actually right before it's becoming Shabbos, and it can continue roasting and cooking even when it already became Shabbos. Now, although we just started off the mission by saying ain't so, we're not allowed to roast something and put it in it unless it's roasted before Shabbos. Here it's going to be permitted, as the Gemara is going to tell us, because the people of the group of the Carbon Pesach are as a reason, they're very conscientious, and they're going to remind each other not to go ahead and be machata b'gechalim, and therefore that's permitted to be done even though it's right before Shabbos. Another similar exception that's permitted in the base of English is when machizin esor. You're allowed to go ahead and light up a fire, just starting off the fire with the woods of the Maduras Beis HaMikdash, of the fire that was in the chamber of fire that was in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash, which as long as you start the fire from before Shabbos, it could continue to flame up and become the big fire had to be, even when it really became dark on Shabbos. And when not concerned, the baby Kahanim are going to flame it up to try to make it into a big fire when it becomes Shabbos and once we slave, which the Beis HaMikdash was this large chamber that the Kahanim would warm themselves up there with a large flame, which was constantly lit up over there because the Kahanim had to go barefoot into the courtyard. As Mordechai explains, because the floor of the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash was sanctified. Like the pasuk says, the actual courtyard was sanctified. Now, so just like we find by klisharis, by the service vessels are sanctified. And it says, just like we know the halach is by klisharis, you now have a chatzitza between you and the klisharis, so to the floor couldn't have a chatzitza between the kohen's foot and the ritzvah, so they have to go barefoot, so therefore they need a fire to warm themselves up. So you're allowed to go ahead and light it and start it right before Shabbos. But as we continue up the top of Chaf Manav, in conscious of Begvulim, but in the boundary, meaning anywhere out of the Beis HaMikdash, then you actually have to totally have the bonfire totally flamed up from before Shabbos. It has to be that the fire has to catch on to the majority. But if not, then we're concerned that if you only just started the fire from before Shabbos, then even when Shabbos starts, you might try to make the flame into the bigger flame. Then you're not allowed to start again unless the fire already caught on to the majority. The Mishnah ends off. He says that if the fire was the chomet from charcoal, then you don't have to, even out of the Beis HaMikdash, have that the majority of the flame is already caught on. Rather, kol shu, it's enough even with just a minute amount, and then it's going to continue lighting and flaming up by itself. because charcoals don't usually just go out, and therefore you don't have to be machat them, you don't have to go ahead and stoke them, and therefore even if the majority on, you could just start it on Shabbos. Some of this we spoke about today's Daf Yomi in the Sefter Shabbos, was related to the previous Daf about giving to a non-Jew before Shabbos, which we had a machlekes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So on that, the Gemara continues in the related discussion that on Shabbos, actually, you're permitted to give food, even according to Beis Shammai, to a dog and a non-Jew. Now, the chiddush of the non-Jew is that even though you're not obligated to feed him, still, as we brought from Taisus, you're allowed to because there is midah shalom that it's not considered totally unnecessary to because we do feed even the non-Jews. And the halacha is telling you that we're not concerned that he's going to take out the food, and that's what Taisus explains it specifically after regarding food, that generally we presume he's going to eat over there. If he takes it out, he's taking it out for himself. But if, let's say, other objects, you wouldn't have to give to a non-Jew, as the halacha has, because then it's going to look like as if he's your agent, which even is similar to on Arab Shabbos, but not on Shabbos itself. Then we continue to go talking about things that are forbidden. Arab Shabbos, or maybe even a few days before Shabbos. We said you're not allowed to rent your stuff to a non-Jew on Arab Shabbos. So you're not allowed to send a letter on Arab Shabbos, unless. So we have two different cases. If you did not set a price, and if you did set a price. If you did not set a price, so then it depends. If the person is, like we said, there's many different mafarshim, either means the postmaster or means the mayor of the city. But if he's there, he's always there, that's a permanent residence. So then you could do it on Erev Shabbos. If Beis Shammai says you can get to his house, and Beis Hillel says if you can get to the house closer to the city walls. Now, if he's doesn't have a permanent residence over there, then we said according to everyone, according to Beis Hillel, on Erev Shabbos, you're not allowed to send a letter on the Erev Shabbos. Now, if you were kotzatz, if you set an amount of money that he's charging for this delivery, so then for Beis Hillel, as we explained, then Beis Shammai says it's going to be also, but Beis Hillel holds, then it's going to be mutter to be done even on Erev Shabbos, because what he's doing for himself, because he's charging whatever it is, no matter how much time he puts into it. Now we spoke about things regarding 3 days before Shabbos, that they are also unless you did it more than 3 days before. You're not allowed to go out onto a ship. Again, for Dvar Mitzvah, it is permitted. And then it's machlekes if you would have to tell him that he has to stop on Shabbos to the sailor, to the captain, not. But for Dvar Rishus, you now go with the 3 days of Shabbos. Again, unless it's a day's journey, which then you're allowed to go even on Erev Shabbos. And also, you're not allowed to go ahead and lay siege to a city of non-Jews, again, from Shabbos Rishus, with the 3 days of Shabbos. Additionally, what's regarding 3 days, you said that giving to the white clothing to the launderer, according to the Shammai, it takes 3 days, and therefore they were stringent. They would give it at least 3 days before Shabbos so that the cleaners could clean it. Whereas we said regarding colored clothing, then that doesn't take so long, and therefore it shouldn't be charged as much. And then we heard a story that he figured they're overcharging if they're charging the same amount for the white clothing as the colored clothing. Additionally, we brought that by the cleaners, you should measure before and afterward because either they're shrinking your clothing or they're stretching your clothing. Either way, you have to know if they're not doing a good job. Then we went to the halacha of the Mishnah. It said, Shavet Eilu Be'elu. Shammai and Beis Hillel both agree. Should turn the base about you could have the beam from before Shabbos continue squeezing throughout Shabbos. Why? Why does Shammai agree? Didn't they disagree with all the cases of the Mishnah? Because if it was done on Shabbos, you would not be chayav b'chatas. So therefore, it would be like only gzeir, if we don't make that even according to Shammai. Why would it be not be chayav b'chatas? Why is that skita? So instead, it's either like one of two tanoim, meaning like Rabbi Shmuel or like Rabbi Elazar. Which Rabbi Shmuel? So he spoke about, let's say, the unripe grapes or the unripe grain, which were rust who was squeezed out from before Shabbos, that even where it's allowed to continue on to Shabbos. So you see, because he's not concerned for it being squeezed out because they didn't be done, wouldn't be chayav b'chatas. So he's like the Tana of the Mishnah. Or it's like Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Elazar, the Amar says like Rabbi Elazar the Tana. It says it's talking about like what you find by the honeycomb, where it's crushed from before Shabbos, you're allowed to go ahead and eat that honey on Shabbos, which is not like the classic mashkin shazam, where you're not allowed to drink the liquid because you might have to squeeze it out. Because if you even squeeze it out, you wouldn't be chayav b'chatas. But each one doesn't say like the other one. That he doesn't hold like it's like Rabbi Elazar, because the case of the honey is originally food and it's still a food. So therefore there's no schita. So yeah, of course that's where you're allowed to have the honey. And therefore that wouldn't prove anything regarding like the cases of the Mishnah of grapes and olives. Or the other opinion doesn't hold like that for Rabbi Shmuel, because as Rabbi Yochanan explained, that is only when you're missing a shchika. That's when your Bishmal says committed, which was stage 3. Our Mishnah is like missing dicha, which is stage 2. Oh, Shmuel would have said it's us or that case, because it wasn't really that much question, really being finished on Shabbos. So you can't say he's a Talmud of the Mishnah, because he would say it's us in such a case. Therefore, each opinion disagree with the other one. Who's the Talmud of the Mishnah? Then, again, the way Rashi explains parenthetically, once we were discussing the olive press, so we continued speaking about related halacha. We spoke about the oil or the mats of the badad of the olive presses. The machlekes Rabbi and Shmuel, if it's muksa, which is essentially machlekes Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, which that's a classic, as we'll see later on this Masechta in the laws of muktzah. And similarly, regarding the cargo mat, regarding on Yom Tov, regarding the goats for the milk, where it's designated for something else. The question is, did that make a muktzah or not? That's machlekes Rabbi Shimon Yehuda. That's the same machlekes Rabbi Shmuel. Then we continue to the next Mishnah, which continues on this halacha of Erev Shabbos that continues on the Shabbos, specifically regarding the laws of cooking. So he said you're not allowed to roast. We said cooking might be different because if it's, let's say, raw meat, you are allowed to put it right before Shabbos because that takes a long time. But roasting, we said, could be ready for the Friday night meal. Then you're not allowed to roast the meat, the onions, the eggs, unless it's roasted from before Shabbos, which we'll see in the Gemara how much that is. So too, you not put bread into the oven or the cookies on the coals, only if the surface can be crusted. Again, we're all concerned over here because of coals. But if the surface already hardened, so then it's okay. But as I said, as we'll see in the Gemara, what's he disagreeing? It means the lower part already is crusted. But then we spoke about certain tater that you are by the carbon pesach allowed to lower it right before it becomes dark, right before it becomes Shabbos. You're allowed to lower it in because, as we'll see in the Gemara, the Menei Chabur answer reasoning. We also said you're allowed to, in the Beis HaMikdash specifically, by the Beis HaMikdash, you're allowed to go ahead and just start the fire, and you're not concerned because Kahanim has reason. In contrast to the out of the Beis HaMikdash, it has to be that Beruba, most of the fire took place. Again, but whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, but by coals, then even the Gevulin, you're allowed to have it just by coals, because coals we're not concerned it's going to go out, and you don't have to go out and be machata, and therefore, as long as you start from before Shabbos, not continue on Shabbos, I think